Hello and welcome. I'm so incredibly excited to jump right into today's explainer because we are looking at a truly fascinating and honestly kind of unexpected shift in how we talk about unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs. For literally decades, this whole topic was strictly locked away in the realm of science fiction and fringe conspiracies. But recently, well, the actual language being used by government officials has completely changed. And that shift is sparking an intense debate, particularly within ufological communities. So today, we're decoding one very specific, very loaded term that is gaining a ton of traction: interdimensional. We're going to break down the sources, look at the different perspectives, and figure out exactly why this one word is causing such a massive stir. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so take a look at this recent quote from U.S. Representative Paulina Luna. It reveals a really deliberate choice of words. She actually stated, "I have seen evidence of non-human origin. I don't call them aliens." She also went on to note that she expects witnesses in upcoming hearings to refer to these entities specifically as interdimensional beings. Now notice what she's not saying here. She's completely dropping that classic sci-fi vocabulary. By explicitly rejecting the word aliens and pivoting right to interdimensional beings, she's opening the door to a completely different framework for understanding all of this. And I'll tell you, this specific phrasing has really caught the intense attention of Christian commentators and theologians.
All right, moving on to Section 1, the paradigm shift.
To really grasp why this matters so much right now, we kind of need to zoom out and look at the broader context of how the whole UAP conversation has evolved. I mean, just think about it. 5 to 10 years ago, bringing up UAPs in any kind of serious setting was literally a punchline. It was a subject of complete mockery. But recently, we've seen a massive, massive pivot. We now have top-tier scientists, high-ranking military personnel, and even former presidents openly admitting that these phenomena absolutely exist, and they just can't be explained by our current tech. And very soon, we're facing the reality of pending presidential declassifications. So we're officially moving from hushed rumors to actual official government disclosure.
And that brings us to a massive, glaring question. If we really are on the verge of disclosure and officials like Representative Luna are explicitly saying to us, hey, these aren't your standard biological aliens, well, what exactly are they? If we take that term interdimensional literally, it completely shifts the entire investigation away from biology and astrophysics into something entirely different. And it's this exact question that has triggered a really unique, deeply rooted theological debate that we're about to unpack.
Which brings us to Section 2, two distinct theories.
So let's look at how Christian commentators are taking this political terminology and running it through a highly specific theological lens. The absolutely crucial point here is understanding the contrast between these two frameworks. On one hand, you have the traditional extraterrestrial theory. This is your biological species, physical beings created somewhere out there in the universe, traveling millions of light years across space in highly advanced, nuts and bolts spacecraft. But contrasting that is the interdimensional theory. From a theological perspective, this suggests spiritual manifestations. It posits that there are overlapping realms, a physical realm and a spiritual realm, existing in the exact same space. So in this view, we aren't dealing with spacemen at all. We're dealing with entities like angels and demons that are essentially bleeding over into our physical reality.
Let's just lock in exactly what we mean here. Through the theological lens of the commentators we're analyzing today, an interdimensional being is defined as a spiritual entity, like an angel or a demon, manifesting in the physical realm rather than some biological species traveling from outer space. So when a member of Congress stands up and says, "I don't call them aliens," and uses the word interdimensional, well, for this specific demographic, that perfectly aligns with their biblical worldview. To them, it's not a scientific anomaly, it's a spiritual reality making itself visible.
All right, Section 3, the spiritual lens.
So how exactly are they preparing for all of this? Well, first off, it's really important to know what the sources actually agree on. Commentators fully acknowledge that the vast majority of UAP sightings, roughly 90%, have completely natural explanations. We're talking secret military drones, weird atmospheric lighting, weather balloons, you name it. They aren't sitting there saying every weird light in the sky is spiritual. But they do focus intensely on that remaining 10% slice, the inexplicable residual sightings, the ones that completely defy physics, radar, and natural law. That small sliver, that's what they believe requires a spiritual explanation.
And when they analyze that inexplicable 10%, commentators anchor their whole worldview on specific scriptures. A major one is 2 Corinthians 11:14, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. This is foundational for their argument.
They argue that even if these UAPs or interdimensional beings appear totally benevolent, highly advanced or helpful, maybe they're offering humanity new technology or some kind of cosmic enlightenment, it could actually be a deeply deceptive spiritual force, just wearing a facade of light.
And that flows right into Section 4, the Great Deception.
Okay, so this is exactly where government transparency crashes head-on into end times theology. This deception theory has a few core components. First, as we've talked about, it actively rejects the whole physical alien hypothesis. Second, and this is a big one, it views the impending government disclosure not as some pure scientific breakthrough, but actually as a form of global manipulation. Third, it warns humanity against falling for that facade of light we literally just mentioned. And finally, it roots this entire phenomenon in an active spiritual battle, heavily citing Ephesians 6, which talks about humanity wrestling not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces. In this worldview, the government releasing UFO files, it's actually seen as the staging ground for a massive global spiritual test.
Now, because they view this as a spiritual test, these commentators are urging their audience to take very specific, actionable steps, rather than just reacting with panic or blind curiosity. Step 1, pray for guidance and discernment. Step 2, look beyond the facade. They're urging people to use the eyes of heaven to see past whatever might physically be presented to the public. And step 3, respond through a scriptural lens. Basically, they want their audience to have a theological framework fully prepped and ready to go, rather than just absorbing whatever the mainstream secular narrative ends up being.
Finally, Section 5, bracing for disclosure.
Right now, we're watching a collision course happen in real time between official government declassification and this deeply rooted theological interpretation. The source material carries a really powerful warning. You need to have an answer. The rest of the world is going to be talking about this. And honestly, that perfectly captures the urgency felt within these communities. They believe you can't just laugh off the UFO topic anymore. With presidents, scientists, and members of Congress openly discussing it, the broader culture is going to be completely dominated by this conversation once those files are fully out there. So the commentators are really stressing that Christians have to figure out where they stand, do their research, and prep a firm theological response before the floodgates of disclosure officially open.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question to ponder. When UAP disclosure finally happens, when the files are opened up and all the evidence is laid out on the table, how is the world actually going to interpret it? We've seen today how just a simple shift in terminology, going from alien to interdimensional, completely flips the lens from scientific to spiritual for a massive demographic. It kind of makes you realize that the hardest part of disclosure might not be the government releasing the secrets. No, the hardest part might actually be how our clashing worldviews process the unexplained once it's finally brought into the light. Think about that next time you look up at the night sky. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.